The wrench slipped from Jace's hand and clattered against the metal floor, loud enough to wake the dead sectors. 3 apex predators had entered the station. 1 maintenance worker waited in the dark. The math wasn't supposed to work. Jace sat cross-legged in the center of the observation deck, his uniform torn at the shoulder, coolant residue mixing with his own blood on the tiles. Around him, the station groaned. Gravity shifted in pulses that made his inner ear rebel. Pressure vents screamed from the walls at frequencies that turned his teeth to glass. Magnetic fields hummed at the edge of hearing, a chorus of invisible wires tightening around the room. The last void predator filled the doorway. 12 feet of midnight chitin, blade limbs extended like a cathedral of knives. Eyes, too many eyes, reflecting the chaos like dark mirrors. It had watched him kill its siblings. It had learned his patterns. It knew his tricks. And still it came, because that is what predators do when prey refuses to run. Jace didn't stand. He didn't raise a weapon. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the wrench. The worn handle, wrapped in frayed electrical tape, fit his scarred palm like a key in a lock. He set it on the floor beside him. "Come on then," he said. "Let's see who built the better trap." The creature lunged. "The part that still keeps me up at night, that comes later." 8 months earlier, the air in Bay 6 tasted like recycled grease and dismissal. Jace retrieved the wrench from where it had fallen, wiped the hydraulic fluid from its head, and tucked it back into his belt. The corridor stretched above him, built for species with 4 arms and spines that didn't compress. He moved through the crawlspace beneath the main deck, shoulders brushing metal, knees aching against the grating. The space was too small for bulwarks, too narrow for Hectarians, too low for Vorians. It was made for humans. Or rather, humans were the only ones who fit. He emerged into the main corridor and almost collided with GRN. The bulwark trader filled the hallway, 4 arms laden with equipment crates, fur dark and matted with station dust. GRN didn't look down. Bulwarks never looked down. Jace pressed himself against the wall and waited for the bulk to pass. The crates smelled of ozone and dried protein. GRN's hooves clicked against the deck plates in a rhythm that said, "I am large, therefore I am central." "Human," GRN rumbled, not a greeting, a classification. Jace nodded at the space where GRN's chin would be if bulwarks had chins. "Bay 6 pressure regulator, leaking again." GRN made a sound like gravel in a gearbox. Then he was gone, leaving Jace with the smell of his own sweat and the familiar pressure of being scenery. He walked to the maintenance locker, entered his credentials, and waited for the system to process. The screen flickered. Auto-filled his name, CORRINJACE, human, maintenance, NON combatant. The last word stayed on the screen half a second longer than the others. Or maybe Jace only imagined that. His left palm itched. He didn't scratch it. The scar tissue webbing across his palm, a chemical burn from a reclamation zone incident he'd never had treated, caught on the wrench handle as he pulled it free. A reminder, he told himself. Some wounds teach better than they hurt. The station was called Accordance Hub. 30 species negotiated trade routes here, orbiting a trinary star that painted the viewports in shades of bruised purple and arterial red. The corridors were monuments to diplomatic optimism, built wide enough for the largest delegates, tall enough for the most armored security details. The coalition had designed it as a cathedral of cooperation. They had forgotten to build a church for the mice. Jace spent his mornings in the spaces they forgot, the ventilation shafts that carried more than air, the maintenance tunnels where the walls were thin enough to hear through, the gaps between the official station and the living one. He heard them before he saw them. 3 Hectarian security officers stood outside the briefing room, mandibles clicking in the staccato rhythm of their native tongue. Jace understood the clicks. He had spent 2 years in the reclamation zones, where understanding kept you alive longer than armor. But he let his face stay blank, let his shoulders slump in the posture of someone who only knew one language and that one poorly. 4 colonies silent in 3 weeks, one was saying. The clicks translated in Jace's head like a second audio track. No survivors, no bodies, something hunting in the asteroid fields. Predators, another asked. Extinct species. Void runners. The archives say they died out during the expansion wars. Then something woke them up. Jace kept walking. His boots made soft sounds against the deck. The wrench in his belt knocked once against a conduit, a quiet bell. None of the Hectarians turned. The briefing room door opened. Tri emerged, 8 feet of chitin and rank insignia, mandibles polished to a ceremonial gleam. Tri was security chief for the hub, a position earned through combat credentials that Jace had memorized from public records. 47 confirmed engagements. 0 retreats. A Hectarian of the old school, where honor was a geometry of direct confrontation. Tri's eyes, compound and unreadable, passed over Jace without landing. To try, Jace was a maintenance icon on a schematic, a label, non-combatant. Jace turned the corner and exhaled. The reclamation zones had taught him that invisibility was not an absence. It was a presence so small it registered as background. He had learned to make himself into wallpaper, into ventilation hum, into the thing the eye skipped because it had been categorized and dismissed. He had also learned that wallpaper heard everything. The shuttle bay smelled of ionized fuel and alien pheromones. Jay stood at the back of the assembled hunting party, his maintenance uniform swapped for a pressure suit that still carried the station's logo on the shoulder. 23 species had sent representatives, Hectarians in armor that clicked with ceremonial readiness, Vorians with scales gleaming under the bay lights, hissing strategy in their philosophical cadences, a single bulwark, not GRN, loading a rifle built for arms twice Jace's thickness. Tri stood at the front, mandibles spread in the Hectarian posture of command. The Void Predators have been located in the K449 asteroid cluster, Tri said. The translation implant in Jace's ear rendered the clicks into flat, efficient speech. We deploy in hunting packs. Standard coalition engagement protocol, direct confrontation. Honor through victory. Jace raised his hand. The bay went quiet in layers. First, the Vorians stopped hissing. Then the Hectarian clicks dried up. Finally, the bulwark's rifle loading sequence paused with a half-charged power cell. Tri's head turned. The motion was slow, deliberate, the way a turret tracks a target. Human, Tri said, not Corin, not Jace. Human, you have a question. I know the K449 cluster, Jace said. His voice came out steady. He had practiced this in the maintenance tunnels, speaking to the dark. The mining layout, the ventilation systems, the pressure differentials, I can. Can you lift a standard cargo container? Tri asked. The question hung in the air. No, Jace said. Can you breach chitin plating with your bare hands? No. Can you survive exposure to vacuum for the 4 minutes required to engage a void predator in open space? Jace looked at his scarred palm, the webbed tissue, the memory of a chemical burn that had taken 16 hours to stop screaming. No, he said. Then you cannot join the hunt. Tri turned back to the assembly. We deploy in hunting packs, standard coalition engagement protocol. Jace lowered his hand. No one looked at him as he walked to the maintenance shuttle docked at Bay 12. It was a craft designed for repair runs, not combat. Its hull was patched with plating from 3 different manufacturers. Its navigation computer still had the reclamation zone maps in its backup memory. He didn't file a departure request. Maintenance workers didn't need permission to fix things. The shuttle's engines coughed to life. Jace plotted a course for K449 and didn't look back at the hunting party's warships, bright and armored and loud as they burned toward the asteroid field. He sipped lukewarm nutrient paste from a tube, checked a routine pressure reading on his wrist display. The paste tasted like nothing. The reading was normal. Then he engaged the drive, and the stars stretched into lines around him. K449 was a graveyard wearing a mining colony's clothes. Jace brought the shuttle in low, using the asteroid's own rotation to mask his approach. The reclamation zones had taught him that the loudest thing in space was the engine you didn't need to use. He cut thrust 3 kilometers out and let momentum carry him into the debris field. The colony's main habitation dome had been peeled open. Not exploded, peeled. The metal curled outward in strips that caught the distant starlight like silver petals. Jace maneuvered the shuttle through the wreckage, counting the damage patterns. 4 parallel gouges in the exterior plating, spaced wide. Limb span twice his arm length, maybe more. He sat down in what had been the central processing bay. The shuttle's landing lights cut through the dark, illuminating dust motes that moved too slowly for gravity. The airlock cycled. Jace stepped out with a wrench in his hand and a portable scanner in his pocket. The colony was cold, not just temperature cold. The cold of something that had been alive and wasn't anymore. His breath fogged in the beam of his helmet light. The sound of his own breathing filled his ears, too loud, too rhythmic, prey sounds. Jace moved through the wreckage like he moved through maintenance tunnels, small steps, shoulders in. He examined the gouges up close. They weren't random. They followed a pattern. The Predator had been testing the structure, finding weaknesses, applying force where the metal was thinnest. Not a berserker, a strategist. He found the first body in the secondary storage bay, or what was left of it. The remains were arranged with a precision that made Jace's stomach clench. Not eaten, displayed. The scanner in his pocket beeped. Jace froze. The sound was tiny, almost swallowed by his helmet, but in the silence of the dead colony it might as well have been a scream. He looked at the readout. Biological residue, fresh, less than 6 hours old. The Predator was still here. Jace didn't run. Running triggered pursuit instincts. He had learned that in the reclamation zones, where the things that hunted you were often less dangerous than the panic that made you loud. He moved toward the colony's industrial core, where the cryocontainment units still hummed with residual power. The plan formed as he walked. Not a battle plan, an architecture plan. The cryopods were designed to preserve ore samples during transport. They could drop temperature by 200 degrees in 3 seconds. The magnetic restraint systems were built to hold volatile materials in place during processing. The gravity generators, jury-rigged by the miners for comfort, could be reversed. Jace didn't have claws, he didn't have armor. He had a wrench, a scanner, and the stubborn refusal to stop turning the screw. He found the main processing chamber. High ceilings, exposed conduits, a single entry point that could be sealed, the perfect room for a predator to hunt in. Or the perfect room to hunt a predator. Jace worked for 6 hours. He didn't sleep. He didn't eat. He moved through the colony's systems like a ghost through walls, rerouting power, calibrating sensors, testing pressure differentials. The wrench turned bolts that hadn't moved in years. The tape on its handle frayed further, the adhesive leaving black streaks on his palms. When he was done, he sat in the center of the chamber and turned on every light. The lure was simple: brightness in the dark, noise in the silence, vulnerability where there should be none. The void predator came through the ventilation shaft. Jace saw it in pieces. A limb first, blade-tipped, catching the light. Then the head low to the ground, eyes reflecting his own illumination back at him. Then the body, unfolding into the space like a nightmare origami. 12 feet of midnight chitin. The archives hadn't done it justice. It moved in a pattern, testing the air, listening to the hum of the generators. Jace watched it track the room's layout, finding the corners, identifying the exits. It was mapping the architecture the way he had. He almost admired it. Then he triggered the first trap. Magnetic nets deployed from the ceiling conduits, charged to full capacity. They caught the predator mid-stride, wrapping around its blade limbs, pinning it to the deck. The creature screamed. The sound wasn't animal. It was structural, like metal tearing under impossible stress. Jace stood. The wrench was in his hand. The predator twisted. The nets held for 3 seconds. Then the creature's limbs reconfigured, joints rotating in directions that shouldn't exist, and the magnetic fields shredded. It was learning. Jace ran, not away, toward the secondary chamber. The predator followed, faster than anything that large should move. Jace heard its blade limbs striking the deck plates behind him, each impact a percussion of pursuit. He reached the second zone and triggered the pressure sensors. False floors, illusory gravity shifts. The predator stumbled not from injury but from confusion. Its hunting pattern relied on predictable physics. Jace had made the room a lie. It recovered in 4 seconds. Jace dove through the final doorway and sealed it behind him. The cryo chamber, the heart of his architecture. The predator struck the door. The metal dented, struck again. The seal began to fail. Jace didn't wait. He triggered the sequence. Temperature crashed, 200 degrees in 3 seconds. Cryogel sprayed from nozzles he had installed 6 hours ago, hardening in midair, coating the chamber in a shell of frozen silence. The predator lunged through the doorway, blade limbs extended, mouth open in that structural scream. The cryogel caught it mid-motion, froze it in a tableau of violence. Midnight chitin under frost, eyes still reflecting light but dimmer now, slower. Jace stood in the center of the frozen chamber, breathing hard, and looked at the thing he had caught. Then he saw the glint. In the predator's neural cluster, where biology met behavior, something metallic caught the light. Not bone, not chitin, an implant. Small, precise, technological. Jace reached out. His scarred palm touched the frozen surface. The implant was foreign, deliberate. Someone had put it there. Someone had kept these things. Someone had aimed them. The void predator was not an accident of nature. It was a business decision. The shuttle's comm array crackled to life as Jace burned back toward Accordance Hub. He had loaded the frozen predator into the cargo bay, wedged between spare parts and a leaking hydraulic line. The implant sat in his pocket, wrapped in insulation tape. He kept touching it through the fabric, confirming it was real. Unidentified craft, this is Accordance Hub security. Try's voice, rendered flat by translation. State purpose. Corin Jace, maintenance shuttle returning from K-449. Jace kept his voice steady. I have something for the science division. A pause, static. The hunting party returned 6 hours ago. They reported no void predator contact. The K-449 cluster is classified as inactive. Jace looked at the frozen shape in his cargo bay. The frost was already melting, dripping onto the deck in slow, dark beads. They didn't look in the right places, he said. Another pause longer. Dock at Bay 12. Do not exit your craft until security arrives. Jace cut the comm and stared at the stars through the viewport. The trinary star painted the asteroids in shades of bruised purple and arterial red. He traced a line from K449 to the hub, then extended it further. Station Abundance, the sector's fuel artery, 8 docking arms, 3 million residents. The line of sight was perfect. He pulled up the station's public transit logs, cargo manifests, maintenance schedules, cross-referenced them with the Predator's implant frequency. 12 more Predators, hidden in the station's own cargo bays. The Obsidian Veil had been breeding them here, under the noses of 30 species who thought they were negotiating trade. Jace's hands stopped shaking. He didn't notice when they had started. The shuttle docked with a clang that echoed through the empty bay. Jace sat in the pilot's seat, the wrench in his lap, and waited for the security team. But it wasn't Try who opened the airlock. It was Voss, 8 feet of armored Hectarian, but wrong. The exoskeleton was painted with Void Predator ichor, dark streaks that smelled of ammonia and copper. The mandibles were filed to surgical points, not ceremonial gleams. The left forelimb ended in a carbon steel prosthetic that clicked against the airlock frame with a sound like a gun cocking. A neural jack gleamed at the base of Voss's skull. Remote drone coordination. Modified scent glands masking pheromone signatures. Voss didn't speak immediately. He cleaned his prosthetic with a solvent wipe, mandibles clicking in a rhythm that wasn't Hectarian standard. The wipe was disposable. The prosthetic was not. "You think you hunted a monster," Voss said. His voice was low, almost gentle, the way a blade is gentle before it cuts. "You found a product line." Jace's fingers tightened on the wrench handle. The tape was old. It would hold. "The Obsidian Veil has been breeding them for years," Voss continued. He didn't look at Jace until the solvent evaporated. "You're not fighting monsters. You're fighting a business model. And business models don't bleed." Behind Voss, through the open airlock, Jace could see the corridor stretching toward the station's core. He knew every crawl space, every vent, every gravity plate and magnetic coil and pressure differential. He had spent 8 months learning to be invisible in those corridors. Now he understood why that was an advantage. 12 more, Jace said, not a question. Voss's mandibles spread in the Hectarian posture of amusement, or threat. With the filed points, it was hard to tell. 12 more, Voss confirmed. And a demonstration scheduled for Station Abundance in 72 hours. The Coalition needs to understand what happens to species who don't pay for protection. Jace looked at his scarred palm, the webbed tissue, the chemical burn that had taught him more than any armor. Then he looked past Voss, into the corridor, and began mapping the architecture of the trap he would build. The galaxy called us fragile because they only tested for what could break us. They never asked what we learned from being broken. 12 more Predators, hidden in the station's own cargo bays. The Obsidian Veil had been breeding them here, under the noses of 30 species who thought they were negotiating trade. Jace looked past Voss, into the corridor, and began mapping the architecture of the trap he would build. He had 72 hours. The demonstration at Station Abundance was a deadline written in blood. But Voss didn't know that Jace had already measured the crawl spaces, that he knew which gravity plates were due for maintenance, that he had spent 8 months learning the station's breath, its groans, its pressure differentials. Voss cleaned his prosthetic with another solvent wipe. The ammonia smell of Void Predator ichor mixed with the chemical sting of the cleaner. "You could join us," Voss said. The mandibles clicked in a rhythm that might have been an offer. "The Obsidian Veil pays well for species who understand adaptation. Your trap craft is adequate." Jace stood. The wrench was in his hand, the tape rough against his scarred palm. "I don't hunt for money," he said. Voss's head tilted. The neural jack at his skull base caught the bay lights. "Then what do you hunt for?" Jace didn't answer. He walked past the 8-foot armored figure, close enough to smell the ichor, and stepped into the corridor. His shoulders didn't touch the walls. He had learned to make himself small. But now, for the first time in 8 months, he wasn't making himself invisible. He was making himself a ghost in the machine. The maintenance tunnels became his war room. Jace moved through them for 20 hours without sleep. The corridors built for giants were irrelevant now. He worked in the gaps, the ventilation shafts that carried more than air, the pressure conduits that fed the diplomatic quarters, the magnetic coils that kept the station's artificial gravity stable. He mapped 8 sections, not the whole station, just the ones that mattered. In Section 4, he reversed the polarity on 3 gravity generators. The change was subtle. A passenger walking through wouldn't notice. but a creature that hunted by vibration and pressure differential would find the floor unreliable. In Section 7, he recalibrated the magnetic containment fields around the fuel lines. The hum was invisible, but to a predator with electromagnetic coordination, it would be a scream. In Section 2, he installed pressure vents, not for atmosphere, for sound, specific frequencies that mimicked prey distress calls, lures that would draw hunters toward empty corridors. He worked with the wrench and his hands. No security clearance, no oversight. Maintenance workers didn't need permission to fix things. GRN found him in Section 5, wedged behind a coolant processor, rewiring a temperature regulator. The bulwark's 4 arms hung at his sides. His fur was matted with station dust. He didn't look down at Jace, not exactly, but he didn't look through him either. Human, GRN said. The word had changed timbre, not classification, something closer to question. Pressure leak, Jace said. He didn't stop working. Section 5 runs hot, could rupture the diplomatic quarters climate control. GRN was silent for a long moment. The coolant processor hummed. Somewhere in the station's core, a fuel pump cycled. The Hectarians are evacuating the upper levels, GRN said. They say predators have been released. They say we should run. Jace tightened a bolt. The wrench turned smooth in his grip. Running's loud, he said. GRN's massive head dipped. Almost a nod. Then he reached into his equipment harness and pulled out a portable magnetic shield. He set it on the deck beside Jace's toolkit. For the leak, GRN said. He walked away without looking back. But his hooves didn't click in the old rhythm. The sound was softer. The posture of a species relearning its categories. Jace looked at the shield. Then he went back to turning the screw. The first predator entered Section 4 at 347 Station Standard. Jace watched it on a maintenance monitor, hunched in a crawlspace 2 decks below. The camera was low resolution, black and white, designed to spot coolant leaks, not monsters. But the shape was unmistakable. 12 feet of midnight chitin, blade limbs extended, moving through the diplomatic corridor with the patience of something that had never known hunger, only hunting. It paused at the intersection where Jace had reversed the gravity. Jace triggered the sequence. The floor became the ceiling. The ceiling became the floor. A 180-degree inversion in 0.8 seconds. The predator's blade limbs struck the deck plates that were no longer where physics said they should be. Its electromagnetic coordination spasmed, trying to recalibrate to a down that had switched places with up. It recovered in 4 seconds, faster than Jace had calculated. He triggered the pressure vents. The distress frequencies screamed through the corridor, drawing the predator toward Section 7, toward the magnetic fields. Jace crawled through the maintenance shaft, knees aching against the grating, shoulders brushing metal. He moved toward Section 7, not away. The reclamation zones had taught him that the safest place was often the one the enemy had already passed. The second predator entered through the cargo bay in Section 2. Jace saw it on another monitor, then a third in Section 8. The obsidian veil had opened the cages. The demonstration had begun early. He adjusted his maintenance uniform, tugged the frayed electrical tape on his wrench handle tighter. The tape was old. It would hold. He checked the time, 4:12. The station's alarms hadn't triggered yet. The diplomatic species were still sleeping in their oversized beds, dreaming of trade agreements, unaware that the architecture around them had become a weapon. Jace opened the hatch to the observation deck. The deck was a hemisphere of transparent alloy, built for species who liked to contemplate the trinary star during negotiations. The viewport framed the stars like a frozen explosion, bruised purple, arterial red. Jace sat cross-legged in the center of the floor and waited. He had modified this room last. The gravity generators here were set to pulse, not invert, random intervals, unpredictable shifts. The magnetic coils hummed at frequencies that made his teeth ache. The temperature regulators were primed for a crash drop. Jace didn't look at the door. He looked at the wrench in his hand, the worn handle, the smooth head, the tape that had frayed past the point of replacement. He thought about the reclamation zones, the chemical burn that had webbed his palm, the 16 hours of screaming, the lesson he had learned there, which was not about pain, but about patience, about the difference between a wound and a teacher. The door didn't open, it dissolved. The final void predator filled the doorway, 12 feet of midnight chitin, blade limbs extended. Eyes, too many eyes, reflecting the chaos like dark mirrors. It had watched him kill its siblings in Sections 4 and 7. It had learned his patterns, it knew his tricks. And still it came, because that is what predators do when prey refuses to run. Jace didn't stand, he didn't raise a weapon. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the wrench. The worn handle fit his scarred palm like a key in a lock. He set it on the floor beside him. "Come on then," he said. "Let's see who built the better trap." The creature lunged. Jace triggered the final sequence. Every environmental system he had modified across 8 station sections activated at once. Temperature crashed. 200 degrees in 3 seconds. Gravity inverted, then pulsed, then inverted again. Magnetic fields screamed at frequencies that shattered electromagnetic coordination. The Predator's blade limbs struck deck plates that were no longer where physics said they should be. Its chitin cracked in the cold. Its eyes, too many eyes, went wide with the confusion of a strategist outthought. Jace moved through the chaos like a man who had memorized every shift, every groan, every fractional delay. He didn't fight the monster, he fought the room. The Predator struck at him, missed. The gravity shifted. It struck again, missed. The temperature dropped. Its movement slowed, crystallizing. Jace walked around it, through the chaos he had designed, and reached the maintenance locker where he had hidden an insulation blade 3 days ago. The blade was designed for cutting conduit, not chitin. He drove it into the Predator's neural cluster. The resistance was brief, then give, like a seal breaking, like a pressure valve releasing. The creature fell, not dramatic, not cinematic, just a collapse of mass and momentum. Midnight chitin against the deck plates. The blade limbs twitched once, then stillness. Jace sat back against the viewport. The stars watched through the transparent alloy. Bruised purple, arterial red. 3 apex predators, 1 maintenance worker. The math wasn't supposed to work, but math, he thought, is just another kind of architecture. The doorframe behind him creaked. Voss stood in the ruined doorway, carbon steel prosthetic raised, mandibles spread in the Hectarian posture of shock. Or rage. With the filed points, it was hard to tell. "You didn't fight them," Voss said. His voice was different now. The gentle blade quality had dulled. "You didn't even touch them, you fought the walls." Jace looked at the wrench on the floor, then at Voss. "Your warriors hunt with honor," Jace said. His voice was quiet, it didn't need to be loud, the room was still. "We hunt with architecture. The difference is that our prey dies in rooms we built weeks ago." Voss's prosthetic twitched. The neural jack at his skull base pulsed with a light Jace hadn't noticed before, still active, still transmitting. "You think this is victory?" Voss asked. The mandibles clicked in a broken rhythm. "The Obsidian Veil has buyers watching this channel. Every species in the dead sectors will know your face, your station, your architecture." Jace stood, his legs ached, his palm burned. The chemical scar tissue had reopened somewhere in the chaos, weeping clear fluid. "Good," he said. He picked up the wrench. The tape was looser now. Some of the adhesive had worn away in the cold. "Let them know," Jace said. "Let them know what happens when they test for what can break us. Let them know what we learned from being broken." Voss didn't move. The prosthetic stayed raised, but the light in the neural jack flickered. A transmission ending, or a transmission changing hands. Coalition security arrived 17 minutes later. Tri led them, mandibles clicking without rhythm, armor scuffed from moving through corridors that had become traps. Behind him, Lys's scales had paled to ash gray. GRN's 4 arms hung loose at his sides. They found Jace sitting against the viewport, the frozen predator at his feet, the insulation blade still in his hand. Voss stood in the doorway, prosthetic lowered, neural jack dark. The fight had gone out of him somewhere between the gravity shifts. Or maybe he had finally understood that he was fighting the wrong geometry. Tri's compound eyes found Jace. They stayed there, not looking through, looking at. "Human," Tri said. The word was still classification. But the timbre had shifted, like gravel becoming something finer. "The Obsidian Veil ship is intercepted," Tri continued. 12 additional predators recovered from hidden breeding facilities. Station Abundance is secure. Jace nodded. He didn't stand. His legs weren't ready. "The Coalition," Tri said and stopped. The mandibles clicked once, a single punctuation. "The Coalition security protocols are being rewritten. Your methods, they are being studied." Jace looked at his scarred palm, the webbed tissue, the wound that had taught him patience. "Don't study me," he said. "Study the gaps, the crawl spaces, the places you forgot to build for." Tri was silent. Then his head dipped. Not a Hectarian gesture of submission, something else, something closer to acknowledgement. The station's alarms had stopped. In the quiet, Jace could hear his own heartbeat, and the distant sound of fuel pumps resuming normal operation. The air tasted like ozone and victory and something else. Loneliness. The same loneliness that came with being seen after months of invisibility, with being classified as something other than background. He walked back to Accordance Hub 3 days later. The corridors were the same, built for giants. Gaps for humans, But the aliens who passed him now stepped aside, not far, just enough to create space where there had been none before. GRN was in Bay 6 loading equipment. He looked down as Jace passed, actually looked. His forearms paused in their motion. Human, GRN said. Pressure regulator, Jace said, still leaking. GRN made the gravel sound, but it was softer now, almost something else. Lissa was in the diplomatic quarter, scales still pale, discussing treaty terms in hissing cadences that Jace understood better than she knew. She stopped speaking when he entered. Not because he was threatening, because he was a variable she hadn't calculated. Try found him in the maintenance locker, filing a repair report. The system, Try said, mandibles clicking with an unfamiliar hesitation. The system autofilled your name. It still says NON combatant. Jace hit submit. The screen flickered. Good, he said. Try stood in the doorway for a long moment. The chitin of his armor caught the light differently here in the small space. Less ceremonial, more real. The Coalition offers you a position, Try said. Security Division, Tactical Adaptation, rank equivalent to caste-leader. Jace pulled the wrench from his belt. The handle was worn smooth. The tape was frayed past saving. He would need to replace it soon, or not. I fix things, he said. Your architecture saved millions, Try said. Your trapcraft rewrote our understanding of combat. You could. I fix things, Jace said again. He didn't look up from the report screen. Pipes leak, regulators fail, gravity plates drift. Someone has to turn the screw. Try's mandibles clicked once. The rhythm was new, not contempt, not honor, something in the space between. Your warriors fight with what they are, Jace said. He thought of Voss, of the neural jack still transmitting. Of the buyers in the dead sectors who had watched a maintenance worker unmake their product line. We fight with what we know. The difference is that what we are never changes. What we know, that adapts. Try left without another click. Jace finished the report. He walked to the command deck, where the frozen void predator had been installed in a cryo display, a monument to the day the galaxy's math failed. The insulation blade that had pierced its neural cluster sat in an evidence case beside it. He set the wrench on the command console beside the frozen predator. Its worn handle gleamed under station lights. Proof that the galaxy's oldest weapon wasn't teeth or claws, but the stubborn refusal to stop turning the screw. The observation deck viewport framed the stars. Bruised purple, arterial red, the same view, the same station, the same corridors built for giants. Jace picked up his next repair ticket. The monsters were handled, the pipes still leaked.